you be willing to let the little bills go ahead of you real quick so we can spend the rest of the time?
I'm very happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. I think that people are here mostly for your bills. So Representative Masin, can you, would you be able to tell us about your bill quickly so we can spend more time on the other bill? And we have a Representative Dettmer has one as well. I don't know if he's here. He's here. Okay. Representative Masin, Representative Simonson moves House File 1616 to be before the committee for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. And I think you wanted to quickly tell us about your Eagan TIF proposal. Welcome.
Okay. Madam Chair, members, thank you very much, and thank you for Representative Hansen also for being courteous to us. It's a fairly simple bill. It's a TIF bill for the city of Eagan, and there are new owners for the Lockheed Martin property. This is at the corner of Yankee Doodle and Pilot Knob, one of the busiest intersections in Dakota County. And during the process of the redevelopment, this council would like to do the best job at redevelopment possible, so they want to make sure that they have all the tools available to make sure that they can get what they would like, because the company obviously has some constraints. So what I'm going to do is let Mayor McGuire give you a few details.
Okay, great. Mr. Mayor, welcome.
Chairman Chesky, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you to the committee for having me in to talk about Representative Mason's House File 706. Thank you also to Representative Masin for filing this bill. As Representative Masin suggested, the former Lockheed Martin property in Eagan is at a very high profile and high visibility and high traffic intersection in our community. It's a very important intersection, and for 45 years now, Lockheed Martin has been on that site with a building that has also been 45 years old. The building has survived the market, but I think it has probably outlasted its market, and with the transfer of the property from Lockheed Martin to CSM, the council is particularly interested in redeveloping it to 2015 standards. And so CSM as a partner in that is prepared to present to the council with a mixed-use plan, mixing office and retail for that property that will significantly enhance the value of the property and the tax base to the tune of about $8 million. In order for them to be able to do that, one of the things that the City Council would like to have in its toolbox is the ability to participate and achieve some of its goals for the area, that being minimizing surface parking, building a site that is to pedestrian scale, and is enhancing the pedestrian and bike access and connections with other areas of that high-profile and important intersection. So we ask for a bill here that just gives us a very limited TIF ability to negotiate an agreeable plan with CSM and to participate in the area of that increment. And with that, I'll thank you for your time. I'll note that our Economic Development Director, John Hohenstein, is here if you have any questions. And I'll open that up to Representative Masin and/or questions from you, Chairwoman Podolsky.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're glad you're here, and you too, Representative Masin, and thank you for being here for questions. Are there questions? I'm trying to move Representative Masin and Dettmer through first, even though Representative Hansen was scheduled first. So I think people are more finding that bill a little more interesting than your Eagan TIF there, Mr. Mayor. But are there questions, members? I think a lot of folks who at least live in the metro are very well aware of this intersection and where we're talking about. And I guess, let's see, Representative Davids has a question. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand around this place you never ask a question unless you already know the answer. But what is CSM? I'm missing something here.
Mr. Mayor?
CSM Corporation, it is an acronym for something, Chairman Chesky and Representative Davids, I am not familiar. They do have some representatives here in the audience, and they might be able to answer that for us.
CSM, anybody know what that is? Here we go. Welcome. If you can just tell us your name for the tape as well. And
Tom Palmquist, Vice President of Commercial Development for CSM Corporation. It's an acronym that stands for Colonial Services Management, now reduced to CSM. We're a Minneapolis-based developer and property owner, been around since 1976.
Thank you, Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just so members know, this was not in the smoking hot tax bill last year, but it would have been.
Thank you, Representative Davids. And Representative Masin, thank you. Unless there's other questions, is there anyone who would like to testify for or against this bill in the public? Otherwise, we're going to lay this over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here, and to the other testifier who didn't testify, thank you for taking the time to be here. And like all TIF bills, we stay tuned. We're not sure where we're at with them, but appreciate you coming.
Madam Chair, Committee, thank you very much.
Thank you. So now Representative Dettmer. Yes, please. So Representative Myra moves House file, if that's okay, Representative Myra, 1437, for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you. And so Representative Dettmer, again, Representative Hansen, thank you for your allowing this. Representative Dettmer would like to talk to us about his Forest Lake Economic Development Authority. Representative Dettmer,
thank you,
welcome.
Madam Chair and committee members, and Representative Hansen, thank you for letting us go first here. Again, the Forest Lake TIF is a duration extension. Authorize the City of Forest Lake to extend the duration of TIF District Number 21 through 2025. So it's a 10-year extension of the existing TIF, and subject to conditions in the Section 1 of the piece of legislation. This is for redevelopment of the district, and was certified in 1988. And with this 10-year extension, it is scheduled to decertify in 2015. So we're looking at 2025 to extend it 10 years. With me today is Chris Johnson, the mayor of the city, Forest Lake, and also Aaron Parrish, the city administrator.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Parrish. Mr. Parrish, I assume that's you. Would you like the pages to have those passed around to all of us, or they can set them right in front of us, whatever you want, so we can see those better?
I think I'll set them in front.
Okay, sounds great. That's excellent, thank you. And Mr. Mayor, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As you said, Chris Johnson, I'm the mayor of Forest Lake and also the president of the Forest Lake Economic Development Authority. And we've been working on a project the last couple of years that is looking to redevelop and add vitality to our former downtown and the main strip that has historically run through Forest Lake. We have had a significant amount of community input over the last 2 years with surveys and community town hall meetings, and a strong message that we've received from our businesses and residents has been to do something to try to help spur on redevelopment along that corridor as some of the other development has moved more along the freeway. And so we've submitted this legislation to extend a TIF district with the idea that we would specifically target 2 areas along our downtown region for redevelopment, and that includes a site that is the current City Hall site along with a block north of it and adjacent to it, and then also a site that is an older mall that is about 12% occupied. And so we've been working on this and asked that it move forward. We have gone to both the Washington County and also the school district because they're the primary 2 entities that would stand to lose as a result of this by having this tax increment financing or tax increment stay within the city and specifically on these projects. And they both recognize the regional significance of this area for redevelopment. And both the county and the school district have expressed support in their letters and our materials from both the county and the school district encouraging that this legislation pass. And I think that reflects their understanding of the regional significance that this has. We also now have a development partner. We've got a development agreement with a company called Pace Development, who's going to partner with us on the private redevelopment of the former mall site. There's also a component of the mall site that includes a public facility that would not be part of the TIF expenditures. That has been a controversial area in our city, but ultimately I think it's a good thing for the city. But this TIF legislation would go specifically to the private redevelopment along the old mall site, and then also the site that we'll be vacating, which is just on the north end of downtown. We think that'll add vitality to our downtown that needs a little kick. And so these exhibits that we have up in front show what we have envisioned for the sites. There's currently some blighted housing and a business, and also the old city hall that would be scraped, and a new residential development put into those 2 blocks. And then on the mall site, it would be a private redevelopment with new pads, and then also the redevelopment of the existing private buildings that are currently there. Under the development of contracts that we have, they will be reskinning those to bring them up to a more updated look, along with a complete redo of the parking lot, and that would be shared in by the development partner that we have, Pace Development. And so we think this 10-year extension to the TIF district is certainly good for Forest Lake, and we think that both the county and the school see it as good for the region. And so we also have support from a letter of support from our Forest Lake Area Chamber of Commerce. Colleen Eddy, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, is here as well to show her support. And so we're hoping to see this laid over for consideration in the tax omnibus bill.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Appreciate you being here. Mr. Parrish, did you have comments for us? Or is it Paris? Am I saying your name right?
Parrish and Chair members of the committee. No, Mayor Johnson covered things very well, and I would just note that you should have a handout in your packet. And one of the other minor items to note is, even with the public facility element to the overall redevelopment, there is still an overall increase in the property tax base envisioned based on the redevelopment that occurs privately on the site, as well as on the former City Hall site that will be redeveloped as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, please.
I was just going to say, to offer specifics to that, currently we collect total tax on the mall site was about $94,000 a year and nothing on the City Hall site. We anticipate that that would about double once the project is done on those two sites.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to testify for or against this bill? Questions from committee members? Yes, please. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Cameron Piper. I'm a local real estate agent as well as a 10-year resident of the city of Forest Lake. I'm here before you today to talk a little bit about this TIF district and to just pose a couple of questions for the committee to consider. As we've looked at this TIF district, it's been in existence for approximately 20-some-odd, 23 years, I believe. And my first question is, what have we done with the money in 23 years to create economic development in the city? The Northland Mall site, which has been the subject of some recent litigation, in interest of full disclosure, I am a plaintiff in that lawsuit, has recently was owned by Pace Development, now the current developer of the property with the EDA. But they had previously purchased the property in order to develop that property into an anchor mall, set up a grocery store there, and to develop the entire property. One of the concerns I have with extending this TIF district is, but for this district, that project would have moved ahead. We have a test at the legislature that says, should a TIF district exist, but for what takes place. And in this instance, all that needed to take place was a stoplight, from my understanding, on Highway 61 needed to be installed. Now, if we would have been appropriately allocating our TIF funds, we would have had plenty of money after 23 years to purchase a stoplight to facilitate that development.
Madam Chair.
Representative Lilly, please.
Madam Chair, as a member, I'm just really uncomfortable hearing when someone's involved with a lawsuit. It just seems really a bad place for us to be in.
Well, okay. Thank you, Representative Lilly. I don't know if you heard that, Mr. Piper. I mean, we do let anyone from the public testify in a bill, and my understanding from your testimony, we just heard there's some litigation going on. I mean, we certainly, the legislature's not going to get involved in your litigation.
Absolutely.
So
we're not asking
we don't want to leave that impression, but Mr. Piper, please.
And I'm not here to ask you today to get involved in any way in the litigation. I just, in the interest of full disclosure, wanted to give you some background as to who I am. I'm here today, however, as a taxpayer, a father of 3, a husband in this town, and so I just have concerns about how we're using our tax funds. And if we're going to be extending it for 10 more years, how are we going to use those funds? And so one of my largest concerns was, as that project came forward, they told us that it was originally going to cost us about a 23% tax increase. That was something that concerned me. But in December, 2 articles in the paper, as well as a city council meeting, the city administrator as well as the finance director came forward and said that because these TIF districts were expiring, the tax impact wouldn't be nearly as great. They told the citizens that the tax impact was only going to be about 12%. Now, ultimately, the question before the committee is, should we give them 10 more years, and what are they going to do with the money for 10 years that they haven't already done in 23 years to develop these properties? I have no further comments, unless committee members have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Piper, for your testimony. Representative Dettmer, did you want to respond? Or? No.
Madam Chair, no,
Okay.
I think everything has been said.
Okay. And members, just so you know, just a reminder, we're racing to finish all these TIF bills that people are getting in at the end here for Representative Dettmer and Representative Masin, and they keep trickling in. You know, we are getting to the end of hearings, so if you have them, folks, get them in. But generally, just to put it on the record so people understand, what the tax committee does is we ask these cities, and you will now get the same request, to provide significant more detail, just so the public knows that as we review these TIF bills across the state, we look at a lot of information so that committee members can, and it's made public to the full committee, to understand exactly what these cities are. Generally, in these hearings, we watch a city come in and sort of do a gloss over of kind of big picture stuff, and we'll be asking you, like Representative Masin and all other members who've carried bills already this year, to provide a lot more financial detail on the proposal, and that allows us to make a better decision on whether we would go forward with the project or not. So to Mr. Piper, we don't typically vote on these as they come before us. We vote on them in the full omnibus tax bills, and members can move to take things in or out.
Understood.
So we won't have a broad debate on that issue right now. So we appreciate you being here, Mr. Piper. We appreciate you being here, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Representative Dettmer. And we're going to lay this over unless there's there are other testifiers. Please come forward. We do want to take your testimony. You know, I always make sure to ask that, and it's amazing how often there isn't anyone. But you always ask because someone sometimes appears. So thank you so much.
Somebody like me pops up.
Thank you for being here. Welcome.
All right. My name is Ben Winnick. I'm here because of several positions I have right now. I'm a newly elected council member in Forest Lake. I'm a business owner in the affected TIF district and a resident of Forest Lake. Anyway, if City of Forest Lake can get more tax revenue without costing the citizens of Forest Lake a significant amount, I'm in favor of. Unfortunately, I don't know what this TIF money is being used for, and as a council member, we have not been engaged to take a vote on it with the current council or anything else with this TIF district. I wanted that on record. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Winnick.
Winnick, yep.
Okay, thank you for being here.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to ask again because I've been surprised twice. Is there anybody else who'd like to testify for or against this bill? Okay, thank you so much. Questions from committee members? If not, we're going to lay over Representative Dettmer's bill, House File 1437, for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
committee members.
So now, Representative Hansen, you've been very patient, and you are the person who was scheduled, but I think a lot of people are interested in your bill, Representative Hansen, and I know you've expressed to me that you're still working on it, and you're trying to get some concepts out there. So I had encouraged, before everybody had come to every single agreement, that we just get a hearing in place here so people can begin to talk about this. And so Representative Hansen now moves House File 1336 for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House File 1336 is a tax bill relating to silica sand. It has three general components. One is relating to the existing aggregate silica sand tax that can be recovered by local units of government. The second is a tax on raw sand that is mined, and the third is a percent tax on processed sand, similar to what is in the taconite area. You have in front of you the bill's summary. This bill is not the moratorium. It is not the generic environmental impact statement. It's not House File 906, but it is the tax bill running separately. I know that there are a number of people that want to testify, and I am eager to hear their input on the bill.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Who would like to testify for or against this bill? Or just concerns?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. My name's Doug Losey, and I work for Uniman Corporation.
Doug Losey, was it?
Yeah, Doug Losey, L-O-S-E-E.
Welcome.
Yes, Uniman Corporation. I've got a handout here that I'd like to pass on to the committee.
The gentleman behind you will, if you just want to hand it to him. Please.
This particular handout is an analysis that we had done on the other states that we would consider in our competitive market and their existing tax structures. Thank you.
Okay. And we don't have it yet, but we'll all get it here in just a second. So did you want to proceed? Please. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Mike Wallenius. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Uniman Corporation. I'm responsible for all of, all of Uniman's mining and production facilities in the United States and Canada. I've worked for Uniman for the past 25 years, and I've spent the last 16 years here in Mankato, Minnesota. And we recently, late last year, purchased an office building in Mankato, and we're in the process of relocating our operations management group there. I'd like to give a brief overview of Uniman's history in Minnesota and then go on to commenting on the bill. Uniman is one of the largest non-metal industrial minerals producers in the world and is the world's largest producer of frac sand. We have operations, 13 frac sand plants in 8 states. Uniman has produced frac sand and non-frac sand here in LeSueur County since 1970. Frac sand has been produced in LeSueur County since the early 1950s by our predecessor, Gopher State Silica. Uniman's non-frac sand products are sold to some of our most valued customers, which are locally here in Minnesota, for applications mainly in glass, foundry, and roofing shingles. That non-frac business represents about 7% of our total production here in Minnesota, and it is delivered to those customers within the state via truck over public roads. All of our frac sand, which represents about 93% of our production here in Minnesota, is shipped out via rail, and it leaves the state and it is consumed in other states. No consumption of frac sand in Minnesota. Both Uniman and its on-site excavation contractor, D.H. Blattner of Avon, Minnesota, are fully unionized. In total, Uniman and D.H. Blattner currently provide about 200 unionized jobs represented by United Steelworkers and the operating engineers, and over 40 management and engineering jobs here in Minnesota. These jobs pay substantially in excess of the LeSueur County median income and include other significant fringe benefits. The unionized jobs and many of the management positions are held by local residents from the area. LeSueur County and Uniman relationship serves as a good example of how comprehensive land use plans, mining ordinances, and existing rules in Minnesota on environmental review can effectively be used for permits for frac sand mine and production facilities. Through the years, Uniman has worked with LeSueur County to complete 4 environmental impact statements. Each of these environmental impact statements has taken about 4 years to complete at a cost of about $4 million each. All of that cost paid by Uniman. The most recent EIS for an approximate 1,000-acre mine, which represents about 25 years of reserves, was completed and deemed adequate in December of 2012. LeSueur County issued a conditional use permit based on that EIS in February of 2013. I will note that that was a very transparent process, and during the EIS and CUP hearings, there was really no public opposition to the project. We've hosted a number of tours by state and county delegations, as well as a busload of concerned citizens from Wisconsin. Those folks are going to be living next to our facility we're constructing over in Wisconsin. But a lot of the visitors came down to see how Uniman operates, and this was to help the EQB, PCA, and DNR understand the state-of-the-art processing and our reclamation practices. The most recent tour was last week when the DNR commissioner and his senior staff came down to visit us. We've been a cooperative corporate citizen in helping the state understand what frac mining and processing entails. I believe that each of you received a handout in your packet, which was a brief one-page summary of the potential impact, economic impact of the level of taxation proposed in 1336 on Uniman's operations in Minnesota. If you have that handy, we can take a look at that. First of all, the assumptions there are that our facilities will be running at full capacity. and that all material that we produce as finished product will be sold, and the current pricing for those products. That's what went into making up this table. Column 1 represents what we are currently paying in taxes. We pay a 15-cent per ton sold aggregate tax to LeSueur County. Column 2 represents what we believe indicates the maximum impact of 1336. It takes the 15-cent per ton LeSueur County tax and raises it to 30 cents, and it changes it from ton sold to per ton excavated, which means that tax is $2,550,000. There's a new state extraction tax in the bill, which is $1 per ton excavated. We estimate that would cost us $8.5 million annually. And then there's also a new tax, a state processing tax, which is 3% of the selling price of the frac sand per ton processed. And in our case, that represents, all of the extracted tons are processed. So we end up with $16,125,000 there. If you add those up, the total impact is $27,175,000 per year. If you go to the right-hand column, it's what we determined to be the minimum impact, and that, again, is changing from 15 to 30 cents per ton for the aggregate portion, but we reduced that to ton sold instead of ton excavated, so that's $1.5 million. Change the state extraction tax, not the rate, that is still $1, but change the tons to tons sold. That changed it to $5 million. And then the state processing tax, again, was changed to tons sold instead of tons processed, and that's $9.5 million. So in the best case scenario there, we see $16 million per year. Things that also can impact this are the deposit itself. And I don't want to get into a lot of detail there, but we do a lot of exploratory drilling, and our drilling indicates that our mines are going to have lower recoveries. That means less product produced from the tons mined, so this tax will have a greater impact on us in the future, as we will have to mine more tons to ship the same amount of tons. The justification for the extraction tax is these funds are to be appropriated to the EQB for the purpose of oversight of fracturing sand mining industry. As I indicated and illustrated earlier, there's a 40-plus year history in LeSueur County of successful management of the existing environmental rules in Minnesota that resulted in 2 frac sand operations becoming essential parts of the local community. Very little EQB oversight was necessary for this to happen, and all of the costs during that process were paid by Unimin. So a tax there seems unnecessary. The justification for the processing tax is threefold. 1/3 for the maintenance of roads in counties where frac sand mining and processing occurs. 1/3 for the purchase of lands by DNR, lands that contain potential frac sand resources to protect unique hydrological features, endangered or threatened species, and unique geologic features. And 1/3 for the acquisition of permanent easements by the Board of Water and Soil Resources to prevent frac sand mining in wellhead protection areas. The first third of the processing tax seems to be unnecessary, as the state aggregate tax is already in existence. Each county can currently impose a tax on all materials mined within its boundaries, not just frac sand, to collect funds for road maintenance and other applications. I understand that most counties do not apply this tax, but as you saw in the above table, LeSueur County does apply this tax, and it's applied to all sand and gravel, not just silica frac sand. We do believe that it should be charged to all materials mined, because after all, sand and gravel operations have the same impacts as frac sand as far as moving material over infrastructure, environmental impacts, reclamation, etc. In addition, this bill calls for the potential doubling of the state aggregate tax rate. A further tax dedicated to these purposes seems unnecessary and duplicative of existing obligations. The remaining 2/3 of the processing tax seem unnecessary, as Minnesota environmental rules, through the implementation of an EIS, will address and through the CUP process protect and mitigate these concerns. In addition, it's quite punitive in nature that a frac sand producer be forced to pay a tax that by its nature is designed to inhibit or stop the frac sand producer from perpetuating its existence by not being able to obtain future resources for its mining operations. This is especially alarming to companies like Unimin, who have already invested hundreds of millions of dollars in its operations and its people in Minnesota. It also seems particularly bad tax policy to tax existing operations to fund and permit regulatory assistance for potential competitors. We expect competition in this industry. Indeed, there are many new mines and plans proposed here and in our immediate competitive market. But regulatory costs should be borne by the applicant themselves, and indeed, our EIS law and permit laws provide for this already. Both the state, for their permitting, counties and cities can charge the applicant for all consultants they need and the cost of the environmental review. The new sand tax proposed in 1336 would raise the amount of tax Unimin pays on sand by as much as 20 to 35 times. Taxation of this magnitude will significantly damage the ability of Unimin Minnesota operations to remain competitive in the frac sand industry. Frac sand does not merely exist in Minnesota and Wisconsin. The frac sand industry is highly competitive and is located in a multitude of states. Unimin currently has 10 operating frac sand facilities in 7 states, in addition to our operations here in Minnesota. Only 2 states in which we operate frac facilities require any special or local sand tax or aggregate tax. In Arkansas, they charge 1.5 cents per ton, and in Missouri, they charge about a quarter of a penny per ton. There's no tax in any other frac sand states in which we operate, and Minnesota already is charging 15 cents per ton. Low-cost producers with favorable shipping capabilities are the most competitive. Producers located in states without such high levels of taxation will have prohibitive cost advantages over producers located in Minnesota. Taxes at these levels would cause us to move production and would deter future investment in operations in Minnesota by Unimin and others looking to enter into the frac industry in Minnesota, and will drive frac sand development and jobs to other states. The proposed new sand taxes would be in addition to the approximate $3.2 million that Unimin pays in other existing taxes, such as corporate state tax, state payroll tax, property taxes, etc. A portion of the proposed legislation tax revenues will be designated for reclamation efforts. Responsible governmental units may require reclamation bonds as part of the conditional use permit process of any proposed project. These locally managed reclamation bonds can be actively updated on an ongoing basis, making such taxation unnecessary, less effective, and an undue burden on the industry. If the proposed legislation becomes law, the frac sand mining industry will be the only mining industry to be charged with all of these types and levels of taxes. This level of proposed taxation is unparalleled in the state or anywhere in the country. Although quality of finished product plays a role in marketability of frac sand, and frac sand deposits found here in Minnesota are of top quality, eventually economics dictate how much frac sand will be sold from Minnesota. So in the case of this extreme increase in taxation, higher operating costs will result. At some point, frac sand selling prices driven by higher operating costs will be too high, and in the end, prospective producers and long-standing, well-regarded Minnesota frac sand producers such as Unimin will be forced out of supplying frac sand from Minnesota. Madam Chair and members of the committee, Representative Hansen, I want to thank you for your time. I hope I've been able to clearly express Unimin's sincere and significant concerns about Bill 1336. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Wallenius.
Close enough.
Okay, thank you. Further testifiers for or against this bill? We have a long list of questions, but we want to get through all the testimony first. Got a bunch of people on the list. Please, welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Ken Sulam with the Minnesota Association of Townships. I will attempt to be very brief. I spoke with Representative Hansen before the hearing, and he suggested that I should at least get our issue on the record. I am not here to testify for or against the bill as a whole. Our membership, frankly, is neutral at this point. We have members that love the benefit from the bill. We have members that express concerns about what will it do to the price of gravel. So we are not addressing the bill as a whole. But on page 2, lines 2.20 through 2.22, the new distribution of the new tax on silica alone, currently it states that it goes to the county for the purposes of road maintenance under Chapter 162. And we'd like the opportunity to work with Representative Hansen to clarify there is one part of 162 that addresses the town road account, but it's not clear that this money would actually get into that account in any proportion. And because a number of these mines are on roads and this new fee is trying to help offset the impact, I believe it's Representative Hansen's intent to try to work on the overall impact. So that's the section we'll be working with him on, and if anybody has great suggestions, I'm certainly open to it. I'm working with the county association as well, because we don't want to create an extra burden on our county friends. But we do like, if this bill should be contained in the omnibus bill or move along, we would like to see a little more clarity on the distribution formula to make sure that the town roads are also protected.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sulam. We appreciate it. Other testifiers for or against this bill? Please. And if anyone else wants to, just come on down and take the next chair, because we have a lot of members who want to ask questions, so we want to get through the testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Fred Corrigan. I'm Executive Director of the Aggregate Ready Mix Association. We understand that there are some people who are opposed to the development of industrial sand industry in Minnesota. We get that. That said, let me talk about the many years of work the legislature is committed to aggregate mining and taxation. There was a 2000 aggregate legislative task force that looked at reclamation, that made recommendations on reclamation, that made recommendations on preservation, and worked with local governments to develop ordinances and land use plans to make sure that preservation was a high priority across the state. We worked on regulations, and we worked on taxes for this industry. Aggregates were defined as including industrial sand when all of this work has been done. This, as you heard from the previous testifiers, industrial sand has been mined in the state for many decades. In 2008, the legislature took up the recommendations of the legislative task force and adopted the recommendations that doubled the tax from 7 to 15 cents per ton, adjusted the distribution formula to ensure that both the county and the host community were equally sharing 42.5% each, and also 15% went to environmental improvements that were expanded beyond reclamation of public pits, all recommendations of the legislative task force. It also outlawed local option taxes as part of that legislation. This tax is a local option county tax. 31 counties collected the tax in 2011 for a total of $5.7 million. Those numbers represent the increased taxes. I understand this local option tax is currently the highest aggregate tax in the country before we talk about any additional taxes aimed at silica sand. We also have in other committees that some of you have been involved in have heard from local officials that they don't have the resources to permit these facilities. I just want to make it clear, because I think it's important for this committee to understand that 5 of the 6 counties in southeast Minnesota, many of those officials have been before the committees talking about their lack of ability to have the resources to deal with this industry. Do not charge this tax. Do not charge this tax. It's a local option tax that's available to the county board to impose, and they do not collect this tax today. I also want to talk a little bit about the costs of permitting, and again addressing the comments that some have made about the resources that local governments have to deal with this industry. A permittee that comes before, whether it's an aggregate permittee or a industrial sand operation is looking for a permit, Many of you have served on local governments and gone through these kinds of permits. The permittee pays all of the expenses for the permitting process, including, in most, if not all cases, the consultants that are hired by the local government to go through the permitting process. There is, in most cases, it is done that local government, there is no cost in the permitting process. There is fees that can be charged for consultants, as I say, hired, and there are fees that can be charged for local government staff to work on some of these issues. Most of these permittees also pay for road improvements to make the road adequate to handle the truck traffic that will be carried on those roads, whether that's rebuilding the road itself or whether that's increasing the capacity of the road or maybe even adding signals or stop signs, traffic control features. Those are costs that the permittee generally agrees to make before the operation begins. And in those 31 counties that do collect the tax, there's ongoing maintenance dollars for county and local projects to work on them to keep those roads up to date. Let me see. A typical aggregate permittee will spend about $1 million in preparing an EAW in Minnesota. That's for aggregate or industrial sand. A typical EIS will cost anywhere from $2 to $4 million, all paid by the applicant. We believe that the industry is currently paying an adequate tax rate and that no additional extraction or production taxes as proposed in 1336 are warranted for any non-metallic aggregates. You've heard the financial impact of one large producer just now. Let me tell you a story about a small producer in southeastern Minnesota who is trying to permit 19 acres for mining of silica sand for the purpose of bedding for local cattle farmers. He faces potentially $1 million in EIS costs for his permit. He may be required to pay the 15 cents per ton, although the county currently does not collect that tax, in local option tax. He may be required to pay $1 per ton in an extraction fee for a business that he would like to start locally and to develop his own property. The Legislative Task Force in 2000 made preservation of aggregate resources, including sand, a high priority. This bill in its current form will discourage preservation of these resources, which will become uncompetitive with other uses of the property and leave Minnesota out of the energy revolution currently underway in this country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Corrigan. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Eric Bryan. I am Director of Marketing for Bryan Rock Products. Bryan Rock Products is a 72-year-old family-owned limestone company. My brother Matt and I represent the fourth generation of Bryans involved with running the business. We have 3 locations in the Twin Cities metro area. One of those is Shakopee in Scott County. 2 of those are in Bayport and Hastings, which are located in Washington County. The construction aggregate market has taken a substantial hit due to the recession. Exploration at our existing Shakopee quarry revealed a substantial deposit of high-quality silica sand beneath the limestone we have been mining for years. Bryan Rock decided to pursue a mining and processing plant together with an adjacent property owner and formed Merriam Junction Sands. In 2010, we began the permitting process and initiated an environmental impact statement to study our proposed project. 3 years later, at a cost of $1.5 million to date, and estimated costs in excess of $2 million when complete, we are still in the environmental review stage of project permitting. Merriam Junction Sands is very concerned about the proposed extraction tax of $1 per ton, doubling the existing aggregate tax from 15 cents to 30 cents per ton, and new proposed 30% tax on sales. We believe that these additional taxes, if adopted, which are in addition to other substantial taxes we are already paying, such as the aggregate tax, property and income tax, etc., will put Minnesota out of the market and we will be unable to compete with production from Wisconsin, Illinois, and other neighboring states. The higher startup costs unique to Minnesota, which include the lengthy time and expense of the EIS, already put Minnesota at a disadvantage in developing projects here. Obtaining financing and attracting investors is already difficult. These additional tax burdens will only make the problem more severe. These projects contribute to the economic health of Minnesota by providing jobs and substantial revenue to the state. Bryan Rock Products is also concerned with the increase in the county aggregate tax from 15 to 30 cents. Last year, Bryan Rock paid $100,000 in county aggregate tax based upon the already existing 15 cents per ton tax. The number would double if the limestone industry would recover fully from the recession. It is projected at the current aggregate rate of 15 cents per ton that our proposed sand project at 660,000 tons, equaling 2 million tons per year of production, would add 100,000 to 300,000 in aggregate tax. And these figures do not include sales tax, property tax, or income tax. We are already the highest tax state in the nation in regards to mining. In conclusion, we are not asking for special treatment. We are just requesting the ability to remain competitive in an industry that competes on a national level. On behalf of my family and our existing union employees, I ask that you help us to keep jobs in Minnesota and don't let these jobs and tax dollars move to Wisconsin or other competing states. And I just personally thank Representative Hansen for all the work that he's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Scott Sustachek. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Jordan Sands, part of Coffin Companies, which is headquartered in Mankato, Minnesota. Really for the last...
Sorry, can you say your last name?
Sustachek.
Sustachek, okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Sustachek, please.
For the last 125 years, we've been down in Mankato mining limestone and have obviously found high-quality deposit of frac sand under that limestone. Through the recession, our limestone business has been hit pretty hard. We've had to cut jobs. Fortunately, Coffin Companies also has a very successful children's book publishing business called Capstone, which has helped our organization continue to grow. We see the opportunity to mine and process silica sand, really the next significant growth opportunity for our business in Mankato, in a way to create significant jobs and economic benefit for the area. Greater Mankato growth is estimated that as we move toward our full production capabilities, that will generate $100 million in economic impact for the Greater Mankato area. This will bring significant jobs to the area, good-paying jobs. These are the kind of jobs that help put kids through college and create new economic opportunity for people. Like Eric, who was just up here with me, you've already heard from a large multinational producer of silica sand. We're the small guys trying to create a small business. Our project will be about 70 mineable acres on areas that we've already mined limestone on. We've already put through significant economic or environmental reviews. We're in an industrial area. We're just trying to prolong the life of those quarries and utilize those assets. And as you think about this tax, the average price of sand, this will add about $3 to $4 per ton to just straight tax. You've already heard about the competitive nature of this business. We're competing against people in Texas, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, obviously, where it's either pennies or nothing versus at least $1 a ton in extraction tax. In a declining market, which this is a commodity business, and really the last 18 months has been more of a declining market than certainly rising, that puts businesses like the ones in Minnesota that would be under this tax at significant risk of failure. What that causes then is, as people are trying to bring these projects forward, investors look at this and say, is this really an area that we want to invest in? We can invest here or we can invest in Wisconsin, where there is no tax and where these businesses won't be exposed should the market turn south. In fact, I just had a conversation with my banker yesterday, who's also a Minnesota-based organization, wondering the very same thing. And they're trying to make investment decisions, certainly not only in our businesses, but others they're looking at. Is this a place we want to put money? And is this something we want to be invested in? And so as the legislature considers these things, and I'm certain you're all aware that the ripple effects that happen in our industry because these discussions are happening. The MPCA has testified on a couple of different occasions about its focus on what constitutes a good mining operation here, and they bring up names like Uniman, like Great Plains Sands, like Miriam Junction, like Jordan Sands, where there's minimal trucking. Where the mines are integrated, the processing facilities are integrated. And in fact, what you have with an extraction tax is it may create, unfortunately, may create a scenario where the sand is extracted in Wisconsin and brought to Minnesota to either be transported or finished. And so therefore, you actually create a problem that we're trying to avoid, which is increased trucking. And so that's where the tax, I think, runs contrary to maybe the intended purpose of it. I want to put a hand up to Representative Hansen, who worked well with him. He's been very open and listening to what the issues are in his other bill. Certainly, we're moving down that path with this one, where he wants to hear all sides of the story. But we certainly think that this tax, in the form that it sits in front of you today, would cause operators like ours, who are very small. We've spent over $1 million already on an EAW on a very small mine. Would certainly cause us to have to look very hard at future investment, and I think would certainly deter other companies from doing the same. And so we would again ask for a tax playing field that's already the highest in the country, based on the data you have in front of you, to allow us to continue to compete and to not burden this industry with something that it can't compete with. I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Sustacek.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Ms. Kadoon.
Madam Chair, as members of the committee, my name is Beth Kadoon. I'm representing the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. We're here in opposition to House File 1336. Our concerns are the same ones that you've already heard from the industry, that these new taxes would negatively impact the industrial sand mining industry in Minnesota and result in increased business costs for not only these companies, but also the Minnesota companies that are buying these products. Minnesota already has a high tax on aggregate that you've heard of 15 cents per ton. That is highest in the nation. The bill is imposing taxes on the mining of this sand that is not imposed in most other states that they're competing with, and at a rate that is now much higher than any other state. The end result, we believe, is a tax that's punitive, uncompetitive tax structure that will result in driving this business activity outside of Minnesota, cause companies to buy from states that are not in, from companies that are not in Minnesota, and also increase costs for the Minnesota companies that are utilizing these products right now. With that, we hope the company will take a look at the impact of these taxes on the jobs in this industry in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kadoon. Are there other testifiers for or against? Oh, yes, please. Welcome.
Madam Chair, my name is Jason George. I'm the Legislative and Political Director with the Operating Engineers, Local 49. Real briefly, I just wanted to give the committee a sense of what kind of jobs we're talking about and why we're concerned about this issue. The kinds of jobs we're talking about are really, as was mentioned before, largely union jobs, good-paying jobs. What does that mean? The total package for an average pit operator that is a 49er anyway is about $40 to $45 per hour. That includes full family health care paid for by the employer and a full pension. Those are hard-to-come-by jobs in rural Minnesota, and those are jobs that, as was mentioned before, you can raise a family on and send kids through college on. I just talked to a pit operator that has 3 kids in college yesterday. So these are the kind of jobs that get talked about a lot at the Capitol. Good-paying, family-sustaining jobs. That's what we're talking about here. To give you a sense of why, well, in addition to the pay, these are also quality jobs in that most of the people that work in these pits live within 30 to 40 miles of the pit. So most of the people, I don't know if you're familiar, in my industry, work highway heavy or road construction. That means they're traveling all over the state, many states, most of the time. The folks that work in these pits get the benefit of living close to home year-round, which is a huge benefit to them and their family. The reason why we're concerned about jobs, as we always are, is the last few years in Minnesota, the construction industry has been facing a Great Depression. From 2005 to 2011, we lost 52,000 construction jobs. And from 2010 to 2011, that was the worst in the country. So anytime we start talking about whatever we're doing to put threats in place to companies talking about moving jobs elsewhere, we get very concerned, especially now, about over the last few years. So we just wanted to express those concerns. Wanted to take the opportunity to really thank Representative Hansen as well. The approach in the House has been much different, and we very much appreciate that. We're talking about ways to move the industry forward and how to get this done, and that's a credit to Representative Hansen. So I wanted to thank him for that and continue to look forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. George. Further testifiers for or against this bill? Okay, so the first questions are Anderson, Loon, David, Slocum. And Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Hansen, I didn't realize that these 5 counties that aren't charging the aggregate tax that we already have in place. I think that's problematic in putting in place a new tax already if they just aren't utilizing the tools available to them. But I don't want to focus on that. Actually, I had a question about your bill and the fact that you're dedicating the funds to the Environmental Quality Board rather than, say, Department of Natural Resources. Can you tell me why you would send it to the EQB, which is outside of the scope of the legislature? We don't have a whole lot of influence. Can you tell me why there?
Representative Hansen, please.
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, the Environmental Quality Board is a state entity that serves to bring all the agencies together. So it is that kind of clearinghouse or the entity that, whether it's DNR, PCA, Board of Water and Sewer Resources, they all have a seat at the table. The Environmental Quality Board is made up of the commissioners of those agencies. It is chaired by the Commissioner of Agriculture, Dave Fredrickson, and it has only 2 staff. And so the EQB, I believe we do have control over. We have the authority with the Environmental Quality Board. And in bills that are moving elsewhere in the body, we have the Environmental Quality Board as being the entity that's involved with providing model ordinances, model criteria. When you have state agencies, they're all equal to each other. The Environmental Quality Board is the entity that brings them together and gets them to be moving in the same path rather than going off in different directions because they're all equal. So that's why we have the Environmental Quality Board.
Representative Anderson.
Madam Chair, just as a kind of follow-up comment to that, I guess the concern that I have is that these are the heads of the agencies who are appointments by the governor. The governor himself serves on this as chair or has that option to serve as such. I would think it would be better served for us to have it in a different entity. And I'm also concerned about, are we then replacing the tax that we currently have in place to acquire land for environmental protection? It looks like we're kind of tripling up on taxes, it seems like, from the aggregate tax that we already have the authority, that the counties already have the authority to impose, the fact that we are also then going to add this tax on, and then we also have the sales tax revenue that is going towards the acquisition of land for the preservation for environmental purposes. And I kind of feel like we're tripling up, and I'm wondering if there's a better way to go about this than what we have here. But that's just my personal comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Hansen, just following on a little bit of what Representative Anderson was asking about, I guess I'm more just curious as to how you arrived at the tax structure you're proposing, because it does seem to be a pretty dramatic jump from not only what we have, but what some other states do with this. And could you kind of explain to the committee what your thought process or plan was there? I mean, from the testimony, it's going to have a pretty dramatic effect on an industry that has been in Minnesota for many, many years. So,
Representative Hansen.
Sure, Madam Chair and Representative Loon, on the local aggregate tax, my intent there was that would be an up to, and I think we have some changes to make in that it's an up to local option for the local governments. I think you've probably recognized in many other places in statute, when we set a monetary level, we often go a period of time before that level is changed. We had testimony earlier today where this particular tax was last raised in 2008. My intent was that would be providing for a doubling of the local government, so it's local control, that option would be there for the local government to raise that tax, so we don't have to wait 10, 15, or 20 years and make that decision here. We would give the local units of government, if they have those needs to recover for road road damage, road and bridge damage, that they could make that choice. The comment that let me just back up. I think it's really important to have this conversation because getting information on the table, like some local governments are not choosing that when they have the issues, I think helps us build a good product when we move forward. The percent on the processed sand, the model I was looking at was similar to what we've had historically in Minnesota. If we go back 100 years ago, we had a percent on processed iron ore, I believe, until 1921, I think. And then there were the taconite changes where there is something now with Representative Dill has described it as some automatic price deflator issue where it's not a straight percentage, but it has some rate related to, and I seek to my Iron Age colleagues to define how that works, but I looked at a flat percent on processed sand, which would be similar to what we have with taconite. The $1 on the excavation tax, my intent there was to look at trying to recover. We have state costs with state roads that if we are moving product, and then this would, and maybe I wasn't successful in getting this accurate, but we do have product that moves in and out of the state that is not mined here, and trying to find some way of recovery of cost for mined sand that is not processed. And so that was the intent in trying that model. Because you have, if you mine a ton of raw sand, you've got silt and clay in there. You may have other materials, so you've got to process that to get it to the fine silica sand that is used for the fracturing extraction for oil and gas.
Representative
Well, thank you for that, and it gives a little broader picture to what you're proposing here. But again, I'm still, and maybe to if any of the members here from the range, or Mr. Michael or Mr. Biggersmith wanted to comment on how this compares to what we do on other types of mining. Is aggregate mining tax structure completely different from taconite, or is there some relationship there?
Mr. Biggerstaff or Mr. Michael, or do we trust those rangers over there to tell us how this compares to their?
Only what you need to know.
Representative Anzels or Masin, do you want to jump in here before? Sure, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. Taconite is taxed currently at $2.42 a ton, but there is no correlation between the tax per ton and the value of the ton on the lower lakes when it's about to be entered into a steelmaking facility, which is a flaw, in my opinion, in the way we tax taconite. Representative Hansen's bill, at my first thought is that it duplicates that flaw. Your production tax would better serve the people, considering the fact that this is a resource that is depletable. Once it's taken, it's taken. In order to protect the people, the roads, the infrastructure, the local units of government, consideration should be given to the profit at the end of the chain here. I think I'll stop right there.
Representative Masin, you want to jump in there at all?
Madam Chair, no, I mean, I would probably piggyback off of Representative Anzel's comments on it's not a perfect system to do a price per ton as opposed to a percentage of the profit. I mean, right now we're finding that the mining companies on the range are paying a substantially lower percentage of their profits in taxes than they have actually over the last 20 years because they're selling ore at such a high price. But then on the downside is when times are tough and you live in a boom and bust industry like we do, we could really be hurting if we changed it to a percentage tax as well. So I think that's the idea behind it, but I'm sure Mr. Michael could maybe expand upon that too.
Mr. Michael, Mr. Biggerstaff, or anything you want to add for Representative Loon?
Madam Chair, Representative Loon, I guess that I think that Representative Anseltz and Moline have sort of covered the structure of the taconite tax, and that there are a couple of differences to point out. As the taconite production tax is a per ton tax, the escalator that Representative Hansen refers to is that there's a provision in the law that automatically adjusts the tax rate up based on changes in the implicit price deflator, which is a broad measure of price changes that's calculated nationally. And so that's a way to provide some inflation adjustment in that fixed amount. The thing that's a little bit different is that production tax is in lieu of the property tax, whereas here the extraction tax that's in House File 1336 is in addition to the normal property and other taxes that this sand industry is paying. I guess the other thing to point out is the value of the products differ quite a bit too, and that makes a difference in how you're using the money. It's somewhat difficult, I think, to compare the two industries because there's a lot of differences between them.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. That was helpful, and that was what I was recalling, that there are some unique other provisions with regards to how we may tax these industries, and I appreciate that. One final just question, and I guess whoever wants to take a crack at this, Representative Hansen or maybe one of the first testifiers at Uniman, and that mentioned that they've had 4 environmental reviews on some of their operations, and including one of an expansion in Kasota. Have there been any problems identified as part of those environmental reviews, or extraordinary expenses, whether it be to, from an environmental standpoint, or from repair and that of the roads and the transportation system identified as part of those reviews?
Representative Hansen, and is your bill addressing anything different in the environmental review area? Just curious hearing that.
Madam Chair, not in the environmental review. I have another bill, Representative Lewin, House File 906, that provides for models, and I'd be happy to talk with you about that particular bill. I would, the testifiers, I would have them respond to the question if they'd like.
Somebody wanted to address that.
And just in case there was any, I guess what I'm wondering is if there was something identified in those environmental reviews you've been through that would indicate that there's a need to, hike the tax up significantly to address some of those situations.
Mr. Losey.
Hi, again, Doug Losey with Uniman Corporation. Thanks for the question, Representative Loon. We're an existing operation, and we've just gone through a couple of our environmental impact statements recently, and the majority of our shipments are by rail and not over public infrastructure. So those environmental reviews did not identify any public infrastructure needs that would need to have some additional resources for the county or the state to repair that infrastructure. As far as the environmental concerns that were identified within the environmental impact statement, it's really for us, it's ongoing monitoring and identification of some resources and putting in place the mitigation and the conditions within the county conditional use permit to account for those things. So really that's what that environmental impact statement brought forth in that process.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just to add to that, a lot of these new permits that are being issue 2 aggregate mining, including industrial sands, are IUPs, interim use permits, as opposed to the traditional CUP. That IUP allows the local government to open that permit up at any time and work with the applicant to address issues that have come up since the permit was originally mentioned. And also the permits that have been issued in the last couple of years have also allowed, or the permittees have agreed to allow local government to reopen the permits to reflect new environmental rules that have been adopted by the state. So it is, as the Unum people mentioned, an ongoing process that allows local governments and the state to work with miners moving forward.
Thank you.
Yep. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If Mr. George could come back to the table a second. And I've got a couple of questions for Representative Hansen also.
Mr. George, welcome back.
Mr. George, we heard testimony from several companies that if the Hansen bill went into effect, they would cease operations, and I would then assume that there'd be fewer companies that would come in. How many union jobs would be lost if this bill was passed into law? Have you done an analysis of that?
Mr. George.
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, no, I'm not doing an analysis of that. We're talking about hundreds of jobs in this industry, though. Hundreds of 49ers work in aggregate pit mines right now and could work, hundreds more could work in this industry if we were to permit sand mining. So that's what's at stake.
So, Madam Chair and Mr. George, we'd lose hundreds of 49er jobs?
Mr. George.
That would be correct.
Okay. And then to Representative Hansen, Representative Anderson alluded to this just a little bit, that some of the money would go to, for reclamation, to buy lands. Would the EQB or whoever's buying the lands, would they be buying known silica sand sites so that they'd be put out of production, or what's the intent? And then I've got a follow-up.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Davids. What's in the bill is looking at areas or wellhead protection areas that are identified. There's a statutory criteria. Wellhead protection areas are where water comes in, goes into the ground, and it's used for drinking water. So that may or may not be right next to the well. You could have an area that's miles away from a drinking water source, but that's where the groundwater comes in and serves to that source. So those are identified, and I can provide information about how those are identified. Also, we have trout streams, unique natural areas. We've paid the public money for a lot of the mapping and analysis where we know where these features are. So it's not just going to be, the intent here is not to be stopping the production. The intent here is if we have a drinking water source, a wellhead protection area, that we don't have the unanticipated impact with that, or that we have an unanticipated impact on trout streams or unique features that are in the area. So that's my purpose, is not to be stopping the mining, but to use those. And I think we've had testimony here today where maybe that some of that can be done through the conditional use permitting process. But I don't want to have something happen where we have a mine and then all of a sudden we have a town that runs out of drinking water because we've impacted their wellhead protection area.
Well, thank you, Representative Hansen, and thank you for that answer. And then also, you had mentioned earlier that this bill is not a moratorium, and that is correct, but with what it would do to existing facilities and ones that are thinking about coming in, it kind of is, even though it's not. It sounds like it's pricing folks out of the market. And also your comment on how does this bill address, you mentioned, we've got Wisconsin, or I shouldn't say Wisconsin, out-of-state mines that are using our roads to get to their destination. How does this bill address that? And then just one final follow-up.
Representative Hansen.
Madam Chair, if we, I'll just use a hypothetical rather than any particular town. Let's say you have a mine that's occurred and they're moving raw sand from Wisconsin or Iowa to a processing facility that's in Minnesota. And then you have the processing of that sand. Then that 3% tax would be occurring on that processed sand.
Okay.
So you're capturing that process.
Okay, thank you, Representative Hansen. And also, I would just like to, when we're talking about Iron Range issues and what's developing as a mining industry, And I want to be very cautious about comparing the two. It'd be kind of like comparing Brad Pitt and Greg Davids. They just not quite there. It's not quite you do. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Benson and Anzels, Davney, Drazkowski, Garofalo, Hurtas, Moline. Representative Benson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm asking a question for Representative Slocum, who had to leave, but then I have one of my own. Her question was, and this would be to one of the company spokesmen, I suspect, is the quote somewhere between $35 and $50 per ton for processed sand an accurate estimate of the general return on that investment? That's the first question.
If someone could come to the table. Otherwise, we are going to come back tonight if we don't get through these questions. We have a room at 6:30, so we'll be here. Is there anyone who can answer the question? Okay.
Well, the second question, Madam Chair, probably won't help either of them, because I'm curious, what is the cost of production for a processed ton of sand?
Somebody want to?
On average, is there?
Nobody wants to answer this question.
And then the third question, Madam Chair, since I'm getting nowhere, I'll go to one more, and that is, I'm curious as to how many gallons of water per ton is needed to process frac sand. And that question may also go for the environmental committees, but it's an important issue because of the questions that were just asked to Representative Hansen about why there might be some areas that we would need to preserve from frac sanding the process, because of in a number of committees we're looking at significant challenges to maintaining our aquifers, and we know this is a potential issue. So no response on either three questions, gentlemen?
Thanks, Madam Chair. With respect to the water question, the water use, that can vary greatly depending on the part of the state that we're in. So I'll speak specifically on Uniman Corporation and down more the central part of the state. The mining that is occurring at our facilities is below the water table, and so we do dewater as part of our operation. Now, as part of our permitting process, we have to monitor that, both water level and quality, and pay the state water use fees on an annual basis for that pumping. But because it's dewatering and we use we recycle that same water for processing the sand, I don't have a perfect answer for you on the gallons per ton, because we're constantly recycling that and moving that water back into the system and keeping it on site. So it's kind of a non-answer, but I wanted to let you know that that varies depending on the part of the state you're in.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, those first two questions, which we did not get an answer, is an important one for me as far as my decision whether I would support this bill or not. The issue of profitability is a really important concern. $1 out of $50 is one thing. $1 out of $2 of profit is quite another, isn't it? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Anzels.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, there's a whole host of issues that come to mind here. Many issues. I would just say to Representative Hansen, go slow, get it right. There are immense social and economic and environmental results to mining. The jobs argument is one that is made constantly on the Iron Range, and it is an argument that you need to pay attention to. In an extractive taxation policy, you do reach a point when you are competing with other domestic sources and other sources throughout the world, that labor costs, permit costs, social costs, reclamation costs are a factor. And lastly, I would just urge you to reach out to the communities where this sand is located and where this is going on and will go on, because the impacts will be many. But I certainly applaud your efforts.
Thank you. Representative Dabney.
Pass.
Representative Drazkowski. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, to my friend Representative Benson, I just want to offer some enlightenment. I think, the question you were asking about what the costs of production are, I think it's a reasonable question, but I want to offer some insights into why I think the industry was unwilling to answer that. Sure. Because I think some of them may be thinking the question that you're really asking is how much money do you have that me and other Democrats can take from you? That's probably why there's an unwillingness to answer that question. Sure. Madam Chair, and for Representative Hansen, presumably these businesses are pricing their product at the maximum price they can before customers will turn away and look to other clients, or look to other silica sand miners, whether it's in Minnesota or in other states. And as everyone knows, the silica sand is primarily used for many purposes: golf courses, dog bedding, parks. But a big increase in the need for the mining it is because of the explosion in energy exploration in North Dakota. And so, as we if this bill were to become law, it would increase the price. Presumably, some element of customers would shift their purchases to other states or not purchase it at all. And my question for you is that because of that tie-in to the oil industry in North Dakota, would that exporting of the silica sand mining business to Wisconsin, would you view that as a concern of yours, or is that a benefit of this bill?
Well, Madam Chair and Representative Garofalo, I don't view that as a benefit or a negative. I think that this bill is at the beginning of a journey that's going to go through the session here. I appreciate the comments that we've heard. I would kind of point out that the folks who have testified today have been the ones that have been engaged in this here at the Capitol. There are companies that are Minnesota companies that I want to stay in Minnesota. I want them to, they're good corporate citizens. They employ a number of people, and they have been, I have been talking to them as we've been on this journey. And the journey is going to continue, but there are some folks who didn't appear today. And there are some folks in regions of the state where sand mining is being proposed, or there are sand resources, or they're receiving sand from other areas. And I think for everyone here on the committee, the testimony you've heard is probably new information for all of us. I mean, it's generally, this is a new industry that's coming in Minnesota. Yes, we've had, if we go back to Henry Ford, he built the Ford plant there because the sand underneath the Ford plant was where they could get the sand for the glass. So we've had these resources for a long time. I believe we can have the industry protect the environment, provide the jobs, and do it the Minnesota way, which we've always done, is to try to make things work. And so I'm not saying everything in this bill is what I have to have. I'm not feeling ownership of this must be what I have to do. I think that we can work through issues and hopefully have a good product here by the end of the day that meets some of the concerns. Representative Benson did raise some of the issues related to water, and we're all going to be talking a lot about water. We do have an opportunity because of proximity to North Dakota, but as you heard, we're also, the sand is going many places. So I'm hoping we can do it the best we can and not drive businesses out or not allow something to occur that has a consequence that we have to come back and pay for with the public later on because we didn't think it through.
And Madam Chair, I do want to thank the author for, I know it's not the subject matter of this committee, but I do want to thank you for keeping the moratorium out of your legislation. I represent Goodhue County. Goodhue County is opposed to that. They've already had a moratorium in place. So you have been sensible and reasonable on this, and I want to thank you for that. But I would hope that the author understands that this is a tax increase that a small number of businesses would be paying, and ultimately this is going to come out of the workers' paychecks for jobs that aren't going to be taking place. We are literally, the sand on the other side of the river is the exact same as it is in Minnesota, and we're going to be providing yet another incentive for those jobs to be taking place over there. But I know you're a sensible legislator, and I would hope that you work to find an alternative revenue stream for your proposal. Thank you.
So we only have Representative Furtas and Masin left, and if we can get through them, we won't have to come back at 6 o'clock. Representative Furtas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, to give a perspective of, what this tax means, 1 ton is 2 buckets of a little Bobcat. That means $15 of every tandem axle truck that leaves the pit is what the tax is. On an end dump, that's $22. And, that's a significant amount of money. The bill calls out that the proceeds are to be used for roads, yet it only is, or at least is being marketed primarily as a need to do road reconstruction. But on the other hand, all of these trucks leaving the pit pay significant road use taxes. It's not like buying a car where you're paying $400. These trucks pay $10,000, $15,000, and $20,000 per vehicle unit per year for roads, not to mention fuel consumption taxes and whatnot. I'm surprised when we're the 44th worst place to do business that we're not doing more to be creating the jobs. The result of this industry and not slapping these folks on the side of the head for taking risk is that we're going to enjoy, if you develop an industry, increased sales use tax from all of the production, as well as personal income on all of the people in the trucking industry and driving, as well as profits on the industry itself. So I think we should be focusing more on the notion that we get the revenue on the back side, not on the front side. And this is an energy-intensive industry, and it consumes a lot of fuel, and it's hard to predict the profit, and it makes it very risky to be able to accept these burdens to develop an industry. We've already heard testimony that $1.5 million for a EAW and other permit costs, and that it's already 2 years into the process and still don't have it. That's another problem that is not related to this bill, but certainly is a problem in Minnesota. Industry is leaving this state because the regulatory process to get a license and proceed is taking 2 and 3 years. I've got some folks in my district that literally went and built 6 other cabinet manufacturing shops throughout the nation in the time it took the public review to get a permit to build one plant here in Minnesota. So it's just appalling that we're not doing more to create jobs and to promote business. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Masin, before your question, would you be willing to move the minutes of March 7th and the 14th?
Madam Chair, I'd move the minutes from March 7th and the 14th.
Thank you. Representative Masin moves the minutes. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The minutes are approved. Representative Masin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have a quick question first from somebody from the industry and somebody from LeSueur County. And my first question is, maybe I misheard Mr. Michael or misunderstood, but I was just wondering if somebody from the industry could confirm that they do pay property taxes.
Could someone come up and tell us about your property taxes? Please.
Madam Chair, Representative. I'm Mike Wallenius, Unum Corporation from LeSueur County, and yes, we do pay property tax.
Representative Masin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then my follow-up question is with the 15 cents, because if I understand it correctly, that 15 cents has to be dedicated to road maintenance.
Actually, if I'm not mistaken, there is a breakdown of that 15 cents. I think it's broken down into thirds as well at that level. I think 1/3 of it goes for the roads, and 1/3 of it goes for reclamation. And I think, I can't remember, Doug, do you remember the other third?
Representative Hansen has it.
No.
You-
I can't,
Oh, okay.
oh, yeah, other environmental, that's correct, for our other environmental use.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I was talking about the 15 cents that I thought that they were already paying to LeSueur County.
Please.
That is the 15 cents we're paying to LeSueur County. That's how it's broken down. That's what the county must do with it.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And my only other comments would be, although I agree with Representative Davids that I don't think that iron ore mining and silica sand mining could be compared necessarily on a one-to-one basis, I do think that it doesn't make sense for mining companies to pay property taxes in the traditional way that we think of them, because they are depleting the value of the property. They are taking what's of value from the land and selling it. And so I think that was our reasoning behind not having the mining companies pay a property tax, but to do a production tax in lieu of property taxes, because they are actually depleting the value of the property when they mine. So I think that, I would encourage Representative Hansen to continue to look at that as well, and to also maybe structure, if there is going to be new revenue, Representative Hansen, to structure it in a way that would directly benefit the cities and towns and communities and school districts that are in the area of the mining company, rather than having it just dedicated to where you have it now. But I think there is a broader discussion here on how long they can sustain mining, how many tons of sand they're mining right now. And I'll just say, having dealt with many mining companies, they'll always tell you that that they can't handle any new tax and that they'll go elsewhere if this is imposed on them. But it is where the resource is. So, I think that we need to keep that in mind, that that they are looking for the resource that's here in Minnesota. So I think that there could be some changes going forward. I don't know that this is the perfect solution, but there are certainly things that we can take a look at.
Thank you so much. Closing comments, Representative Hansen, and we're not going to come back. We're going to adjourn instead and lay this over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill, but closing comments, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
And Representative Hansen, I should say I noted that everyone who testified against your bill thanked you and thought you were sort of a class act. So I think committee members should hear that. And that's what it takes to come to agreement on things. So Representative Hansen.
Well, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As I mentioned, I think this is going to be a journey. I would be open to work with anybody on the committee as this moves forward, or anybody who's in the audience, because I think these are some really big issues that we haven't dealt with. And at this point in time, it's an important discussion and conversation for us to have. So I'm open to that and look forward to the process.
Okay, thank you. The bill is laid over. We're adjourned, members. Thank you. Good, we didn't have to come back.